Ooh! Let's just disregard the entirety of the mess behind me and focus on a different topic for today. Have you ever had a project in your mind or in your to-do list that you'll think, man, I'd love to get to this someday, but I don't know how realistic that is? I feel like that list for me is constantly growing. And I thought that today we could take a look at some of the items and just see what makes them so intriguing for me. By the way, yes, I am wearing one of my more recent vintage knit acquisitions. You might have seen it in my video last time. If you want to see more and hear more about this one and all my other ones, feel free to watch that video. So now, why don't we talk about my dream projects / crafts that I really want to do, but if I actually tried, am I really okay? You know what I mean? Maybe you'll see what I mean when I get there. So the first one is from the same book that I did my Irish crochet top. This book is actually the one that taught me how to do Irish crochet because it does have pretty well worded instructions and pictured instructions on how to do all of the basic stitches. However, you do really need to know how to crochet first, or at least I think it would be really helpful to crochet first. But it is a pretty cool instructional book if you want to learn how to do Irish crochet, and it is completely free. I feel like it's kind of interesting because it starts at like the absolute basics and then it quickly picks up pace, and it has a pattern for an entire jacket of Irish crochet and even more impressively an entire outfit, so like a blouse and a skirt. I would love to make this at some point in the future. I love that kind of blouse front, the silhouette, and to imagine having that Edwardian kind of silhouette with the Irish crochet over like a white linen, very light white linen on top of that. Underneath, I think it would be gorgeous. I don't think it would be good for my wrists, and the little top that I did with a little border already took me many hours. I think upwards of 10 hours just to do a little bit of a collar, so I cannot imagine how long it would take to do the entire dress. I will say though, what I noticed on the dress design is that you have just a few motifs in Irish crochet, and that's really what tends to take a lot of time to do, at least to do it that looks nicely for me because I don't have a lot of practice, and the rest of it is all kind of that fill-in stitch that you can sometimes get. It's not necessarily quick to do that fill-in stitch. It takes me a lot longer to do fill-in stitch than it does regular crochet, but it's, at least for me, a little bit faster than the motifs of the Irish crochet. So that's my first kind of moonshot project. I would love to have the time and patience and wrist strength and mobility to do something like that, but realistically, I don't know if that's ever going to happen. The second project is, I feel, almost in the same vein, but this time it is tatting. I love tatting. I learned how to tat from a Victorian instructional book, which was not easy. Maybe I could have chosen a different craft to learn from a Victorian instruction manual, but this particular tatting pattern has a tatting pattern for a panel of a parasol. I have seen crochet antique parasols in the past, and I think I've seen a tatted one, but just the detail on this looks so gorgeous. I'm not a very particularly fast tatter, so this is another one of those, like, if I start it, I might be finished in 10 years or something. Like, it would take me a really long time, but I also feel that tatting is, for me personally, easier on the wrist. So this is actually a little bit more doable for me than the last one, just because I don't think it would be that strenuous on my hands, or at least not as strenuous as the Irish crochet would be. But this is another one. Oh, can you imagine that kind of lacy parasol with like a beautiful Victorian outfit going out for a stroll in the sun and knowing that you tatted the entire thing? It's almost like I would be too afraid to wear it. Same with the Irish crochet one, especially down at the hem. I would not want that to get into the mud. Like, I would be so worried to wear it, and I wouldn't want to step on the hem or have anyone else step on it because I wouldn't want it to rip, because I feel like that's such an unraveling risk. This next one is in the kind of more interesting category because I don't know how doable it is, just because I don't understand it very well. So this is, from what I could find and I could tell, the oldest printed knitting pattern, and it is part of a book printed in 1655, Natura ex Exenterata, or Nature Emboweled, by the most exquisite anatomizers of her. It is a book on how to, like, dyeing recipes for yarn, lace making recipes, knitting recipes, as well as horse breeding. You know, all the things that you might want to do as a pastime in your day. I mean, maybe it made sense at the time, but for me, the horse breeding just seemed a little bit out of left field. But this is one of those where it is definitely older English. I have a harder time reading it. Like, I can read it actually because the script is quite similar to some old German script that I learned how to read when I was younger. So I'm actually able to read the words. They just don't make sense together as a piece. Keeping that in mind, there is a pattern for stockings in here, for knit stockings. No gauge, of course. I mean, not even Victorian's patterns had gauges. Can you imagine? 200 years earlier, they definitely don't have any gauges listed, or sizes, or type of yarn really. And the pattern is also wordy. Let me show you the paragraph of the pattern. How to knit a hose. Okay, so in that entire paragraph is not one period. Like, it's a sentence that continues across the next 2 pages. And I understand that older English had different punctuation, and sure, there are commas, but like, other instructions did break it up into sentences and directions like that. So I feel like this would be a challenge to try to interpret. I think someone else has tried to do it before, but I would rather not look at their interpretation. I kind of want to look at this completely fresh and see what I could come up with. I have in the past knit combinations from a Victorian pattern that was written up in paragraphs that was also really not easy to interpret. So that gives me a little bit more confidence. This is less of a moonshot, I would say, than the previous 2 that I discussed, because I have knit plenty of pairs of stockings, or hose. I guess in Victorian time you call it stockings, in the past. So it does take a while, usually with a gauge at which they're knit in, but it's something that I can do. I just don't know how successful I'll be at trying to interpret these instructions. So, for example, First of all, I mean, I know how to do this, right? Like, I learned how to do this. I would just have to think about it a little bit more, because even their counting is slightly different. So you first in the top, you must be 612 stitches wide, and then it continues to kind of work in that counting scheme where you talk about how many scores you have of stitches. You go to 612. I won't read you a bit of the pattern because I don't know how interesting that is to you. I was thinking about doing it, but I don't know how interesting it is really. From what I can tell though, from just having read it over a few times, is there is a seam that goes down the back. It does work in knit and purls. I am less clear about how they work the heel and how they work the toe and how they do the sizing, like how tall they expect these hose to be. So this is another one where I would be just really interested to try to knit it to understand a little bit more about the construction of this. There's also many other knitting patterns in here, like how to knit lozenges, how to knit a honeycomb-like pattern. And I would love to try that out and see what they mean by a honeycomb pattern and see what that looks like, and maybe what they might have used it for, like a waistcoat or something. So that's another, this one seems doable to me. Hard, really hard, but I might actually attempt this. And I don't know how successful I'll be, but I might actually attempt this. The next idea that I have is to do with weavings. If you're new here, you might not know this, or you might not remember if you've been around for a while. I do also weave. I took a weaving class a few years ago. I have been weaving off and on in my own time. I have a loom, but what I would love to do is some recreation weaving from cultures and times before they used warp bladed. Basically, I want to construct an upright Viking age loom and knit patterns that were found in pieces of clothing to reconstruct a Viking age outfit. That would be really fun. I have always wanted to do a project that goes from sheep to sweater. I have sheep furs. I have learned how to spin, which is another thing that I have a lot of footage on that. I just haven't had the time yet to cut it together so I can share it with you all, but I do know how to spin now. I need to learn still how to prepare fibers. I don't know how to do that yet, but I can spin, I can weave, and I can knit. So I'm hoping to do that all together into an outfit. But beyond that, I want to construct myself an upright Viking age loom, get an appropriate breed of sheep's fur to prepare into what I can then work into a fabric out of which I can then make an outfit. I know that Evie from Jillian Eve is working on a very, very similar project, which I think is so cool, and I have been following her so closely because I feel like I'm living vicariously through here, and it makes me so excited to work on my own. I think that this is a potential possibility. I don't know how doable it is for me to create an upright loom. If you can tell from the background of this room, I am already stuffed to the brim between all of the different crafts and things that I like to work on and the projects that I have going on. So I don't know that I'll ever find the space to do an upright loom, but that's kind of the point of an upright loom, is it saves you a lot more floor space because it's just leaned up against a wall. I do have a wall in the kitchen that I could use, and it might serve as some interesting decor for our kitchen area. But we'll see. I mean, that one is, again, doable. It's just a question of when. When will I have the time? I have so many things that I want to work on. I want to create sweater patterns in a variety of sizes. I want to do the 1600s stockings. I want to do this upright loom and weaving. I have other things that I'm working on in the background that you'll see at some point in the future that I want to work on and continue to work on. So it's just kind of a matter of time. When can I fit this all in? So this is another one where I think I will do it at one point. It's just uncertain exactly when. I don't know when I'll have the time for that, to be honest. The next set of things that I'd like to do, so this is all pretty, I guess my dream or moonshot projects are pretty from like 200 years ago at least. They're pretty far back. I have some things that I want to do for more recent crafts, like there's a 1940s capsule wardrobes done completely out of knits that I think would be really cool to try. But I think the moonshot ones are the ones from a little bit earlier that require a lot more planning and interpretation and time. Really, I think time is the biggest factor. On top of all the projects though, there are more crafts that I want to learn. If you see on the bookshelf behind me, these red books are the series that I own of original Weldon's practical needlework. And a lot of them include first series, and first series are instructions. That's how I learned how to tat, from that set of books. And it also has the first series. I have the first series of netting. So I want to learn how to net. And I think I have I don't know if I have the first series of, or if Weldon's even did bobbin lace, but I also want to learn how to do bobbin lace. I have a lace makers guild, or I don't know if they're a guild, but they're a group that are really into lace making near me that offer classes in bobbin lace making. So I might take those, but because I do have the instruction from the Victorian era on netting and it has a lot of illustrations in it, I do want to learn how to net. It would be really fun to make my own hammock. I have knit my own hammock before from the Victorian era, and it was definitely not wide enough. I kept on falling out of it, but it would be really fun to net it. And on top of, like, that's very chunky, large netting, I also want to do much, much finer netting and use that to make filet lace. If you've heard of filet crochet is an imitation of filet lace. And I believe filet lace is thought to be one of the earliest forms of lace making because it's just a net background that you have, and then you fill in different holes with stitches to create patterns, and then that is your lace pattern. So I would love to make my own netting and then make my own filet lace from that netting to trim dresses or make my own pieces. I mean, moonshot idea is in the Regency era, a lot of dresses had netting overlay. True, I mean, there were machines at the time that created the knitting, which is probably why that became a lot more popular because it became a lot more affordable, but it would be really cool to make my own netting overlay for a dress, although probably would take an age and a half as well. But we're just talking dream projects here, like moonshot dream projects. That would definitely be a dream moonshot project for myself. I have so many ideas and just not enough time to do them, but I am excited. I do think that I will start working on some of them for sure. Are there any of the projects that I mentioned that you think that you might be interested in trying yourself or watching me try out? Are there other projects that you can think of that would be really like moonshot ideas but involve the fiber crafts that you'd be interested in seeing me try? Then let me know. And if you like the sound of some of these, or you like vintage knitting, historical knitting, boy do I have some projects coming for you, so feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all again really, really soon. See you next time. Bye!